speaking to a new industry for the first time, but he just led this fabulous news conference that Holland America Line gave with big announcements about Koningsdam. So I see there's absolutely no discomfort being in this new business for you. And Orlando is an expert in human resources and organizational development, and he's an authority on human capital. So he seems very well suited to this people business, the cruise industry. Please welcome Orlando Ashford. And let's all congratulate Lisa Lutoff-Perlo. She's been in the Royal Caribbean Group for many years in a series of successive roles of greater responsibility, and was most recently promoted to President and CEO of Celebrity Cruises. So congratulations. Roberto Fusaro, who is Managing Director of MSC Cruises South America. And I think you all know that MSC is currently the largest cruise operator in South America. Roberto is also the chairman of Abremar CLIA, the Brazilian Cruise Association, and he was one of the founders of CERCA, the Argentina Cruise Association. So welcome, Roberto. And Jan Swartz, who only 2 years ago we were congratulating for her promotion to the presidency of Princess Cruises, one of the pioneering women executives in the cruise industry. Welcome, Jan, President of Princess Cruises. Okay, so I'd like to begin with an overall discussion of the North American and South American markets, the health of the consumer, what's going on with the economies in the region, consumer confidence, any regulatory challenges or issues that may be on the horizon this year. And Lisa, if you could start and tell us a bit about North America, and then Roberto, if you could bring up South America, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Well, you know, as we take a look at our North America itineraries, particularly when we look at the Caribbean, when we look at Bermuda, Alaska, we are seeing a really strong year. And it's all of the indicators in North America are strong. The consumer confidence is strong, the economy is looking up, unemployment is down, the housing market is up, gas prices are stable. So within the North America market, people are quite optimistic and taking vacations. And Alaska, in particular, is having a really strong year. So we're very encouraged by that. As it relates to how consumers are thinking about where they're going to travel, they seem to be, given what's going on in North America, more interested in staying slightly closer to home, which is also helping develop a lot of home port itineraries and a lot of investments that are going into home port itineraries, even with new terminals, because we're seeing such a rise in cruise ships that are sailing from different ports out of North America. We, our company, for example, just invested significantly in our port infrastructure in Bayonne to improve that facility as we have more ships and bigger ships sailing out of Bayonne to Bermuda. So it's really encouraging for us. We're also seeing great interest in some of the things that we're doing as a brand to focus on great events that happen within North and South America, our signature events. So we schedule deployment to ensure that we visit New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and Rio we visit for Carnival. So as we take a look at how we're structuring our deployment and how we're investing in different places within North and South America, it seems to be an area that's strong, getting stronger, and doing very well for us right now.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. Well, South America is a very particular market. First of all, it's not a market, it's several markets because each country is a different market in itself. But in each country, generally, the economy is divorced from how the cruise industry or in general the consumption does. If we look at the economy, right now we see that the two main countries in South America are going through very difficult periods. Brazil came through a difficult year where it had very focused on the World Cup. There were manifestations against the government, but we still had a wonderful year. And now the real, the local currency is going down, and that is really affecting the business. But I think that once the currency stabilizes, we will see again a new upward trend in sales. Argentina, if you look at the economy, is a real disaster. I mean, it's a country that last year devaluated 35% in 2 days, put another 35% tax on international travel, and we had wonderfully. And when I say we, I mean the industry. I'm not talking about our company. So as a source market, is really good. Of course, it helped that for a lot of infrastructure and regulatory reasons, some companies reduced the tonnage in South America. So the local business, the local number of passengers cruising in South America decreased because there was not enough ships on board. But what it happened is that we had record numbers of South Americans coming to the Caribbean, going to Europe, going to other destinations. So as a source market, I think it's a fantastic market. And of course, we have other countries that are still in its, South America is in its infancy as a cruise market, and Brazil and Argentina are a little bit more advanced than the other. Colombia is kind of behind it, and it has a more stable economy, and it's growing a lot. Peru and Chile are small countries, but they're growing a lot. So I think there's a lot of potential as a source market for South America. And Brazil, as I said, Brazil is going through a difficult period right now, but I think that after the currency finds its level, we will see again a trend of growth.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to start out with the more area focus by talking about Alaska, which is such an important market. And I'd like to bring Orlando into the discussion here. There was a survey of Travel Leaders Group agents, so very important retail group this year, that found that Alaska cruising ranked #1 out of all U.S. domestic travel destinations. So ahead of New York, Las Vegas, Orlando. And I wanted to ask Orlando if you're seeing that demand for Alaska at Holland America Line, and what's driving it?
Sure, a couple things. So, Lisa, you mentioned one of the indicators that you noticed was housing prices. And so as a person that's moving and buying a new house, I can attest personally that the market's robust because I got in a bidding war and lost on my first house. But I got my second house, so we do okay. And the person that bought the first house clearly has enough money to take some cruises. So I'm looking for them. But we're excited. Direct mail, exactly. I know that. Exactly. But we're excited about Alaska, and whether it's the economic recovery, it's still the best way to see Alaska is on a cruise ship. And so as people are feeling better and more confident, the trend is suggesting that Alaska is coming back, it's strengthening again. So we feel quite good about that. And what we've done in order to sort of leverage and take advantage of that is sort of adjusted the way we've positioned our tonnage. And so we've put a Vista class ship in 2014 to service the Gulf in Alaska. And so, and then moving into next year, we're going to put New Amsterdam, one of our signature class ships, there. And so we're trying to leverage and take advantage of some of the strength that we see by positioning some of our newer and larger ships in that part of the world. And looks like it's going to work, so we feel good about it.
Is it putting you on the spot to ask if we might see Koningsdam in Alaska some?
That would be putting me on the spot. I got asked a question in the press conference about. I mean, clearly, everyone. It's a ship we're very excited about, and others are excited about. And so, as demand makes sense, we look at how we can maximize the deployment of our ships in the short term. That probably is not where we're going to go, but if it makes sense to do that, we would do that.
Okay. And Lisa, you have a lot of capacity in Alaska as well. Could you talk about a little more detail on that market?
Sure. For the size of our brand, we actually do have a lot of capacity in Alaska, and we actually kept 3 ships in Alaska, even when others weren't. We've increased capacity with both the Solstice and now replacing the Century with the Celebrity Infinity. So our capacity is up in Alaska. Solstice, as many of you may be aware of those ships, is really our premier ship that's serving the Alaska market. And right now, for 2015, the Alaska market is very strong. And it's really nice to see that it maintains its strength and its interest in terms of how people are booking Alaska cruises. And as you had mentioned in your opening about me, I have been around for a while. And as I've watched this industry, it's been interesting to see Alaska and Europe kind of ebb and flow. And one year one is really hot, the other year another one is really hot. And this is Alaska's year, so we're very encouraged and very excited about that.
Interesting. Well, Jan, I'd like to ask you, as the cruise line with the largest ships operating in Alaska, how much more can that market grow? It's about 1 million passengers a year. With bigger ships, can it grow, or are there infrastructure limitations?
You're right, and Princess has just such a long-standing love affair with Alaska, and we truly think it's such a beautiful part of the United States. So we have for many years had a large number of ships placed in Alaska, and we see the potential for Alaska in many forms, right? So we also own 5 Princess-owned and operated wilderness lodges within the interior of Alaska. And so there are a number of ways that Alaska can grow in the future, right? Obviously, the size of the ship can expand. We can also sell a greater proportion of our guests on an Alaskan cruise tour, which is a combination of a 7-day cruise and a 3 to 7 day tour inland, staying in our wilderness lodges and going to see Mount McKinley. And so Princess believes that the opportunities are great in Alaska.
And do you think the market can grow beyond 1 million passengers?
I think it's at a really good size right now, and I think we'll probably see over time people evaluate ways to grow either the length of the stay in Alaska as well as the number of people in Alaska. But I would say the Alaskan communities have done a great job of supporting the guest experience and making sure that it preserves the special nature of that beautiful place.
Okay. Well, Princess has always been the biggest ship operator in Alaska, but last week Royal Caribbean announced they're sending the biggest ship to Alaska, Explorer of the Seas, 142,000 gross tons. How will that shape the competitive environment?
I think that kind of development is always great for the entire industry because it draws more attention to a fabulous destination. There are many consumers, as you heard earlier at the State of the Industry, that have still not discovered that cruise is the ultimate way to vacation.
Right.
And I think Alaska is truly just a beautiful part of our country, and it's best seen by sea.
Yep.
So bringing attention to Alaska as a destination and a cruise destination is great for all of us.
Yeah, just another thing I'll add, the majority of our guests that cruise to Alaska are not only new to Holland America, but they're new to cruise. And so it's a great way to introduce individuals to our brand specifically, but to the industry. And so it's something that I think the promotion of Alaska and seeing that growth, I think, helps all of us. So it's a good thing.
I also think it's a big statement for brands to put ships like that in Alaska. It speaks a lot to the appeal of Alaska, and it also brings focus to that part of the country that people may have otherwise not paid attention to. So when people are looking at the Solstice class, and you say, we're taking a Solstice class, or a new Princess ship, or Royal Caribbean making a statement like they're taking an Explorer to Alaska, that's pretty big, and I think it just draws attention and brings more people into the category. To the point that was just made, it's really, that's how you get people's attention. And we talked a lot about how do you get first-time cruisers into the category. There was a lot of talk about that this morning, and how do you expand the base of people that we're talking to, and I think these are great ways that we do that.
Let's move down the coast a bit and talk about some of the new itineraries from the U.S. West Coast. Jan, could I ask you to talk about some of the greater variety of cruises that are being offered out of ports like San Francisco and Southern California?
Sure. I think you've seen a number of the cruise lines do a lot of creative things with respect to itinerary development off the West Coast. So some of you may have heard that Princess has started to do cruises to Hawaii round trip from Vancouver, or coastal cruises from Vancouver. Princess has long had a great relationship with the Port of San Francisco. We do a full season of Alaska cruises from San Francisco, and then we also do longer cruises to Mexico and back. So I think what you've seen with companies like Princess that have a very large presence on the West Coast is a lot of creativity in itinerary development in terms of developing both a greater home ports on the West Coast as well as departure dates and itineraries. So we really are grateful to those ports and destinations, the San Franciscos, the Vancouvers, the Los Angeleses of the world that have supported that effort.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about Mexico now, which has been through a few rough years, Mexican Riviera particularly. Now ships are starting to go back to Mexico, and I think that the decline in sailings from Southern California home ports is going back up again, starting to recover. So what needs to happen in Mexico to be sure that growth continues? May I ask you that question?
Sure. So with Mexico, the greatest opportunity is to reignite consumer demand and interest in Mexico as a destination. And this is where destination partners can be so essential to the cruise industry. So when different ports in Mexico or the country of Mexico puts investment in telling their story about all the things you can do in Mexico, how the safety efforts that they've made, excursions that are now available, all of that helps draw the interest of the consumer, because cruise lines very much look at where do our guests most want to go, and then how well do we deliver on the guest experience when we pull into port. And it's a balance of that interest and operational excellence in delivery that gives us a feel and a direction for where we should design our itineraries for the following year. So I think in Mexico's case, really great efforts around marketing Mexico as a safe and valuable and interesting place to go will be very welcome. And I know people are working hard on that.
Orlando Holland America Line has been very important presence on Mexican Riviera, and I'm thinking of the Sea of Cortez itinerary that your company particularly developed. How much more can that grow? And I also wanted to ask you, there's a new home port that Mexico is building, Puerto Peñasco, Rocky Point, which is just south of Arizona. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's critical to increasing Sea of Cortez itineraries?
Yeah, those are things that we're watching. Critical is not a word I'd probably use at this point. What we found is our home port of San Diego continues to serve us well in these parts of the world, but we continue to look and monitor and watch, similar to what Jan just mentioned. It's really a combination of what are our guests asking us for, and how can we best execute and deliver that. We seem to be positioned quite well with what we're delivering out of San Diego, but if that alters or changes, then we'd make those adjustments as appropriate.
Okay. Is there are the other lines aware of this new home port that's being built, and is that something that is of interest, or?
We are aware, whether it's of interest or not, only time will tell. I think each of our brands, based on either where we are and where we're located, where our ships are, and the size of our fleet, determines the deployment that's best for its brand. I think the West Coast, at one point in time, was a thriving cruise home porting destination where there were quite a few more cruises sailing out of there and doing the Mexican Riviera. That changed over time for a lot of different reasons. It changed because even when there was high demand, I think some brands felt that their assets were better deployed in another place where the profitability was higher. And then, of course, we had the many problems in Mexico where we have to turn the consumer confidence and interest around and work with our partners in Mexico to help us do that. And then California itself, for example, for Celebrity, you're required to use shore power when you're in the California ports, and none of our ships have that capability. So there are a lot of different reasons why and the deployment out of California to Mexico right now may or may not be viable for some brands.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's talk a bit about the Panama Canal now, and of course this very highly publicized Panama Canal expansion. But is that really relevant to the cruise industry, Jan? Will it help larger ships?
Sure.
Or is there a limitation with the Bridge of the Americas still?
Absolutely relevant to the cruise industry for ships of a certain size, right? It will open up the possibility to ship the ships more quickly and directly from the east to the west coast without going around South America. So I think once the canal is open, we will see that impact deployment and itineraries, because there will be more possibilities based on the cruise brand and ship size and ship features and the constraints of the new canal. So I think certainly Princess has had 2 ships sailing through the Panama Canal, and to do that cruise and experience the locks is a phenomenal experience. So the opportunity to show that to even more people would be exciting, I think, as an industry.
Now, based on what Jan just said, I hope they open the canal very quickly so we have less competition from you in South America.
Very good. What about ports in Central America? A lot of ports are here, Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, Nicaragua represented. Are there opportunities to spice up the Panama Canal itineraries by adding some of these new destinations?
Okay, sure, I'll take it. You could, yes, but you really need to position a ship there. And again, depending on the size of your fleet, the attractiveness of the itineraries, the return on the asset, you really have to determine if that's one of the itineraries that you want to do. We have tried it on the other brand. I just left a few months ago, and the decision was that we probably needed to do something else because, again, the area is wonderful. The draw for those areas is usually, and actually not North American guests, they're more international guests, and the ability to attract those guests at the right price is limited.
Well, let's talk a bit about South America now. Roberto gave us a good introduction, what an important destination it is, and source market as well. But of course, we talked about some issues that made ships leave the region. Could you go into a little more depth on some of those issues, infrastructure, bureaucracy, and are there things that are happening to turn those issues around?
Well, a turnaround would be a miracle, but let's see if we can see a little bit. Well, I could go through the issues for all day and bore all of you, but basically, to put it simply, I think the main issues, or most of the issues, there are issues of infrastructure. In some very interesting ports for all cruise lines, like Buenos Aires, the big ships that most of the cruise lines are building right now cannot go into Buenos Aires, so that's a very tough issue. And there are significant infrastructure issues in all ports. All ports are very expensive, much more expensive than ports in the US or in Europe. So those are easy to understand. But one of the main concerns is Brazil. Brazil, as you know, is a very big country, has a huge potential. Is one of only a few countries in the world that allows cabotage cruises only within Brazil, but has a very restrictive interpretation of cabotage, actually very expansive interpretation of cabotage, actually, and it's not uniform. For the tax authorities, one thing is cabotage. For the labor authorities, a different thing is cabotage. So for the tax authority, if you touch 2 ports in Brazil, you have to pay taxes in Brazil. For the labor authorities, if you call 2 ports within 15 days, you have to hire Brazilian crew members. And depending on how you hire them, they are subject to Brazilian laws or not. So all these kinds of things are making it difficult for the industry to work there and to keep developing. And actually that's the reason why, despite a very strong demand, we see that South America as a destination is coming down. I'm optimistic. I have to be. My job is there, so there's no other way around. But I'm also optimistic because I mean the industry is very new to South America, and South America is very new to the industry too. So I think we are starting to dialogue a little bit more, and we're starting to understand each other a little bit more. 4 or 5 years ago, we had terrible issues with Anvisa. Anvisa is the equivalent to CDC. And they didn't understand how a cruise ship operated. And we as cruise lines maybe didn't understand some of the rules that they were trying to impose. So at the beginning, it was terrible. We had lots of discussions. We sat down with them, we discussed, we showed what we were doing, they showed us what they were trying to achieve, and we created a manual, and now all cruise lines are operating without any problems. They are having the inspections very similar to what happens in the US, and they are all passing with high marks because we know each other, and that dialogue is to what we need to do. The same thing started to happen with the labor ministry. We had some terrible issues, and I don't want to be too optimistic because the season is not over yet, but this season has been a very quiet season. We started to understand each other better. They understand that the cruise ship is not the same thing as a bar or restaurant or a hotel, and we understand some of their concerns, and we show them how we're managing them. And this year, we said so far, we haven't had any issues with the labor industry. So yes, in the long term, I'm very optimistic, but I think there are lots of things to do yet.
You know, for the last 10 years of my career before I got this great new job, I was in operations. I ran operations for Celebrity for 7 years and then Royal for a little over 2. And I think your point is very well taken. It's a work in progress. And for those of us who manage the operations of ships, it is a conundrum for us because guests really want to go to this beautiful part of the world. The itineraries are phenomenal. The guest feedback when you go around the Horn is just amazing. And yet it is the hardest place in the world to operate. And I would love to share your optimism, and I would love to see that change if there's anybody that can influence that in any way in the room, because the cruise industry is an important industry. South America is an important place for the cruise industry to go, but it is so difficult that people like me, who have to operate ships there and worry about when the ship goes into port, what's going to happen or not happen, is a really difficult situation. And the guests that visit these countries on cruise ships do help the economy. And I know you know that. I'm preaching to the choir, and I'm not really preaching. It's just, you have. We really want it to work, and we really want to take ships there, and we're just looking for a little bit of help to do it in a way that makes sense for South America and also for the cruise lines. And I really do think that until that changes substantially, we will limit the deployment that we're able to do there, just because the cost of operating there is extremely high from every perspective, and the governments that you run into on any given day tend to make it a little more difficult than it needs to, and it does change from cruise to cruise, and so you really don't know what you're going to be dealing with at any given time. So I think that if we as an industry, there was a lot of talk this morning on the panel, the State of the Industry panel, about how important it is not only for the fact that we have these great ships cruising around the world, it's the cooperation and the collaboration that we're able to establish with all of the places we visit that really are going to make the difference in the type of experiences and the type of deployment and itineraries we can offer our guests.
I'll just piggyback just real quickly because it touches on that, this idea of consistency or inability to deliver consistency is important when you're trying to build a brand and create a brand promise and extend that. Our long-term mariners, multi-star mariners that have cruised with us for a while tend to be more forgiving. They get it, but as we try to grow the new-to-cruise category and as people are attracted to some of these destinations, to your point, you can't deliver an inconsistent product, because then it makes it difficult to get them to repeat. And so making sure that we establish these things so that we can be consistent with what we want our brand promises to be, I think is important for us to invest more.
I think probably everyone is aware that Brazil is going to host the Olympic Games in 2016, I believe in June. Is that correct?
In August.
Pardon?
August.
August, excuse me. Okay. So as far as I know, only one cruise line is chartering a ship to go for dockside housing, Norwegian Getaway, Norwegian Cruise Line. Just wanted to ask the panel, is anyone else interested in sending a vessel down to Rio for charter during the Olympic Games?
I will take that. Yes, that I know of, at least only NCL's Gateway is going there. And interest or not interest, I think it's a business for all of us. I mean, the business is good, any one of us will take it. I think the problem again is a problem of regulations and especially clarity of regulations. In our case, we have been asked for a bid on a cruise ship, and actually we are not doing it because we are not sure how the Brazilian authorities will treat the operation. We are very concerned that we consider it a hotel operation and not a cruise operation. And if it's a hotel operation, we don't know how to. I mean, we don't know which regulations we have to follow. I mean, we don't know which kind of labor authorization the crew needs to have to run a hotel. So I think that what Orlando was saying before, and with Lisa, the lack of consistency and clarity of the rules is hampering the industry. And of course, the Olympics is one-time event. This is not the main issue, but the issue that the big cruise lines are taking capacity up to South America is something that the government needs to pay more attention. And okay, I'm optimistic, but I don't have any proof. No.
We believe you, though. We believe you, Roberto.
Okay,
I'm waiting for Roberto.
Some other guys are doing the work in China. We're doing the work in South America. Someone has to open it.
So nobody else is going to send a ship down for dockside housing. It's a bit late, isn't it? A year away. And it's your peak season, isn't it? Really in the Northern Hemisphere. So, well, let's talk a bit about the Pacific coast of South America, another area that would like to develop more cruises. So Ecuador, Peru, Chile. And Roberto, would you like to talk about some opportunities there? And then I'd like the rest of the panel too. I know Lisa, celebrities doing cruises on the West Coast. And
yeah, well, of course we always look for new destinations. In MSC case, right now we don't have any new ships until 2017, so right now it's very difficult. We already have, next year we will have 5 ships operating in South America, and all on the East Coast, and we're not even going to the southern coast, to the Horn Cape. So I think the biggest problem in the west coast of South America is the distance. I mean, in all of South America, distance is an issue, but in the west coast it's even bigger. I think one of the nicest parts is the southern part of Chile. But if you want to go to the southern part of Chile and embark a significant number of guests, you have to do it either from Valparaiso or to Buenos Aires. And if you do it from Valparaiso, go down, you have to go to Ushuaia. At that time, I mean, you go to Buenos Aires, you don't go back to Valparaiso. And I think it's a very difficult market, as I think it was Frank this morning saying, each cruise line has a number of ships and a number of priorities. I think the west coast of South America, at least for the biggest ship, is down in the list of priority. Maybe for the exploration ship, for another kind of ship, certainly it's a very interesting destination.
I agree with Roberto. We did try it, and I think there's a couple of points just to reiterate. The ports are very far away from each other, so a good itinerary is very difficult to establish. And I hate to talk about this because I don't want to sound overly negative, but we just did a cruise and we had to cancel Lima because there was no place to dock after it had been confirmed. So it was a little problematic for us. So I think before we would go into that again, we would probably wait for a little more somebody else to do it, perhaps, that might do more South America itineraries. We only have one ship on a seasonal basis, so we need to make sure that we're doing deployment that really works for us in the best possible way. South America is an important strategic destination for Celebrity, and so we've looked to expand, but I don't think the infrastructure is there yet, and I think that the itinerary opportunities for us are too limited to pursue those right now.
Now, there was a discussion in Chile about easing the cabotage restrictions so that it would be possible to develop a 7-day itinerary in Chile, primarily targeted at Chileans, right, Roberto? Has that made any progress, or?
Honestly, as I said, we are not looking directly into Chile as a destination, so maybe I'm missing something. I know that they were looking to relax the cabotage destination, but again, I think if you need to embark, people need to embark in Valparaiso. There's no other big port south and no other port that has the air connection. So if you embark in Valparaiso and to go to the nice areas in the south, I mean, you're already done 7-8 days of cruising. So either you go back to Valparaiso or you go back to Buenos Aires. I think the distance is really an issue.
Okay, well, I said in the beginning that there's going to be a separate session on the Caribbean tomorrow, so we're not going to be talking about that here, but we have to discuss Cuba because it's such a hot topic, and I asked everyone on the panel if they would give me some thoughts about what the potential opening of Cuba could mean for their cruise line. Is it going to be an all-Cuba itinerary? What types of things do you see? How soon? Let's get into this topic a little bit more. Would you like to start out, Orlando?
Well, this morning, as Quest said, he challenged CEOs if you have a secret drawer under the desk. Mine's actually in a cupboard behind my desk. But we've talked about Cuba clearly and are excited about its potential. And the minute that the embargo is fully lifted and we can execute, we've talked about a number of scenarios. We're excited about, we've got mid-sized ships, and some of our ships actually will play pretty well because they'll be able to access the Havana Harbor and some of those other locations that would be difficult for the larger ships to take advantage of. And so we think, thank you. Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm trying to think, and it's flashing. So we've talked through a number of different scenarios. The direct answer to your question we don't have, because we need the first thing to happen is to be allowed to legally do that. But when it happens, we're ready to go. We'll be ready to go.
Lisa?
I do think Cuba's importance is dependent on the brand and what types of cruises you offer, but I think we would all be interested in calling on Cuba to some degree within our deployment. I don't know that, Richard, our chairman, did say, no, we're not ready. I don't think that we fully are, but I think we're looking at what it would take to be ready. The ports that you can call on do depend on the size of your ship and where you can go. However, there are quite a few ports that we can call on as we've looked at that. The opportunity to understand all of that is relatively limited because you can't just go there and take a look around and put all your plans together. So I don't know if I'm sure there's a secret drawer. I'm not sure it's so secret, but I don't think all the questions have been answered yet, just in terms of how would we go, what would we do if we went there. I think if you asked Royal Caribbean, they would have a different Cuba strategy, and they may even have a place on the Caribbean panel tomorrow. I think that for Celebrity, if I just spoke for our brand, as we take a look at the opportunities in Cuba, I think it would be a fabulous place to put on our longer cruises. We would not, there is no plan that I am aware of right now, that we would only call on Cuba, but it would certainly be an interesting destination. There's, as we heard this morning, a tremendous amount of pent-up demand, not only for people who just want to visit Cuba, but I think Cuba has a mystique about it that people are quite interested in the destination. So I think once that happens, it's going to go a little crazy with all of us and how we plan to go to Cuba. But I think also to the point this morning, we have to be measured and careful about how we do that. And I think that the worst thing we can do, to Orlando's point and also the point this morning, is we have to make sure that the infrastructure can support our guests when we do go. Because then that would, not be the best thing that we could all do. Just show up there with thousands and thousands of people if the infrastructure isn't ready and the island isn't ready.
And when you say infrastructure, are you meaning specifically port infrastructure, or also motor coaches and everything else it takes to support them?
Yeah, I think there's lots of, some may be more important than others, so I guess you'd have to put them on a priority list and rank which ones do you really need. Port infrastructure we really need. We need to know where our ships can go and if the ports can accept them. And then if you can't get into Havana, if you don't have a ship that's the size to get into Havana, and there aren't a lot of them, then where do you go, and then how do you get your people or your guests to the places that they really want to see? So yes, there are infrastructure concerns that we all should have. The hotels, the beaches, Cuba has progressed and there are amazing hotels, and there are many companies that have invested in beautiful 4- and 5-star hotels in Cuba. There are a lot of tourists visiting Cuba. So for tourism, I don't think that there's so much of an issue with infrastructure, but I think port facilities and logistics of moving that many people around all at once is probably something that we need to ensure happens before we all call there.
By the way, what is the infrastructure limitation for Havana? What's the largest ship that can get in there to send?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I forget. I just do know that there aren't a lot of ships that fit. I'm sorry? 7 meters.
7 meters, okay. Roberto, is there anything?
Well, as my chairman said this morning, we are the Europeans, we are a little less affected by the embargo, but the fact that we are less affected by the embargo, we don't have a ship in Cuba, already says something. And I think the infrastructure issues are very big. As I said before, for South Americans, the Caribbean is very important. Cuba is very important. There's a lot of tourism because of cultural affinity from South America to Cuba. So if sometimes an MSC ship goes there, probably South America will contribute, but certainly it will not be the South American market which defines the deployment one way or the other. And there are no plans that I know of to put the ship in Cuba in the short time.
And the other thing I'll add is I'm a cigar collector, so the minute we're able to go there in an effective way, trust me, we'll be there. I'll be leading it.
You're Frank Del Rio, right? One or the other. Jan, would you?
Yeah, I would just finish it out by saying obviously Cuba is large, strategically located, and quite a short distance from Florida. I think there is a lot of North American consumer interest in Cuba, but I also would echo Lisa's point that our business, and this is true of any destination, right? We have to be able to execute operationally, seamlessly, and get people efficiently and quickly off the ships through immigration or through whatever local process so that they can explore the wonders of the countries, because destinations are why they purchase the cruise. And certainly Princess guests, many of whom are so loyal to us because we can take them everywhere in the world, would expect that level from us. And so I think we will be looking very closely at how that all becomes possible once it's legal to go there. But we benefit from Carnival Corporation having acquired European brands who have prior experience in Cuba. So I think, as everybody has said, we're all preparing. We'll see when the day comes what the world looks like.
So imagine if that day came in the near future. How soon do you think it would take for ships to come after Cuba says, U.S. changes its laws and Cuba says, if they do, we welcome your ships? Could you be there a week later, or would it take months, or?
Depends on when they say that. I think if you know, it happens in the way that, you know, you would anticipate, now that the door is somewhat open, we have time. And we probably could go there quickly. If that happened next week, no, we couldn't. I can only speak for us. I don't think we're ready that.
I think we also have to take into consideration that most cruise lines are publishing a year and a half out in advance, right, our itineraries. And it's the beauty of our business is that once a year we get to sit down and look at how everything's performed and what the guests really liked and what went smoothly and what got the highest financial contribution to the company and sort of reinvent things, right? Unlike a hotel company where you make a bet in a certain destination, we have flexibility, and that's one of the beauties of our business. But we do that a year and a half in advance, and then cruise guests, often the most passionate ones, book well in advance. So there would also be, should the day come, a bit of a discussion about disrupting people's vacations that may be booked 6 months out or 9 months out, in trading that off against making adjustments to itineraries that may also appeal. So there's just a lot of considerations around this topic that, as Lisa says, is very situation and timing specific.
It would create an interesting opportunity, right? We spend a lot of time wrestling with when we have to make itinerary changes based on fill in the blank weather or some other disruption. So here's an opportunity to potentially disrupt an itinerary because neat new opportunity. And so we were going to go to these ports, but hey, how many people want to actually go to Cuba? And would we be willing to do that? I don't know the answer to that, but that'd be a debate that'd be worthwhile having depending on the time.
It would also be a nice reason to change deployment,
Yeah.
wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Something you want.
Something really exciting, yeah.
Well, this might be a difficult question to ask the panel, but will there be winners and losers if Cuba opens?
From a cruise line perspective or a port perspective?
I was thinking from a port perspective, actually.
Well, I mean, look, anytime there's competition, competition will, I think, create some opportunities. People will raise their game. It'll enable us to create more enriching and different, unique opportunities. There will be others that maybe can't raise their game and will be impacted. That's sort of how a commercial system works. So, but,
We always say that when a new ship enters a destination like Explorer to Alaska, we all say competition is good. It makes us all raise our game. It gets more people interested in cruising. I think the same is true for ports. As new ports, and let's face it, the Caribbean hasn't had a new major port that anybody operating in the Caribbean has been able to visit, unless, as we talked about this morning, that's one of the reasons why we create private destinations or out islands or whatever you want to call them. We do that to create the experience for our guests and offer them new places to go in the absence of the other Caribbean ports that we all call on. And while I don't see that changing in any way, to Orlando's point, it is a good opportunity for every Caribbean island or destination to up their game to ensure that with new competition in the marketplace that they stay very relevant and attractive and appealing, not only to the cruise lines, but to our guests.
yeah, I was at a breakfast oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it's tough to say, right? If the demand for Cuba and interest in the region is very large, then ships will shift from outside the Caribbean to the Caribbean. So there may be actually net positive impact for some Caribbean islands from it. So I think it's the market really that sets our deployments, where do guests want to go, and who's providing a fantastic opportunity. And I think that's the great possibility before all of us.
Yeah, the point I was going to make, I was at a breakfast this morning sponsored by a Caribbean island, and they talked about Cuba, and that was pretty much the context in which they talked about it. So yes, it's coming, whether it's now or a year from now or 2 years from now, let's plan on it coming, and we're going to have to elevate our game and create uniqueness and interest for people to continue to come or even expand coming. So they're thinking about it, so that's how it should work. So I think it should benefit us all.
Just being an outsider, let me bother a little bit the experts on the table. Don't you think that, for example, for the 3 and 4 day market, Cuba will be a challenge to the Bahamas? I mean, will be another significant destination that for the 7-day market, I agree with you. The experience shows that the new destination increases the demand, but the 3 or 4-day market, maybe the Bahamas will feel directly challenged. I don't know. Yeah.
You never know.
Okay. Well, we have talked a lot about Cuba. Maybe we should go on to another destination, but thank you all for your thoughts. It's a very interesting topic, one that everybody's discussing. Let's move to a quite different area, very special one, Bermuda. And it's a very interesting destination because of the way it controls and regulates the cruise industry. 3 ports. Bermuda also won the right to host the America's Cup in 2017. And I understand from talking with Bermuda officials that they plan a lot of events and activities and excursions and so forth leading up to this. So even before 2017, there'll be a lot of talk. Speaking to the panelists who have ships in Bermuda, so Lisa and Orlando, is the America's Cup going to boost demand, and how much can Bermuda grow even apart from that because of infrastructure limitations?
Well, as many of you may or may not know, Celebrity Cruises began calling on Bermuda as the first and only destination for a while. So Bermuda is very special to Celebrity. We continue to go to the destination. We love Bermuda. We believe Bermuda loves us as well. We have talked about the America's Cup and what that means to Bermuda. We think it's a perfect destination for the America's Cup. We also believe that it is going to reignite a lot of interest in Bermuda, which is wonderful because I think Bermuda is long overdue for that, and it's very exciting. I think any more interest that Bermuda can have as the wonderful destination that it is helps us attract guests to go to Bermuda. What our involvement with America's Cup is we haven't really talked about that, but just the fact that it's going there. Anytime a destination attracts a major event like that, it's really good for the destination and for those of us who call on the destination. I think to your point, Anne, about the limitations of cruise ships that can call on Bermuda, as I think about that from the purity of a destination and a guest experience perspective, I think Bermuda has done a lovely job of balancing that over the years. But I do think there is an opportunity based on the agreement of Bermuda and the cruise lines to increase the number, either the number or the amount of guests that we can bring to Bermuda. Some of that is philosophical. Some of it is because of limitations in the infrastructure and the size of the ships that can call on Bermuda. And we're all speaking about that right now because I think it's a really good time for us and Bermuda and the industry in Bermuda to talk about how we might actually either increase the number or amount of guests that we can bring into Bermuda. And I know that Bermuda itself is looking at a lot of its own infrastructure outside of cruise guests in terms of new hotels and new capacity, and also reinvigorating Bermuda as a beautiful destination. And I think America's Cup will help with that. And I also think bringing new and bigger and more exciting ships into Bermuda will also help.
Yeah, I think the America's Cup will promote awareness. Awareness lift is a good thing. It's hard to quantify, to know how much of an impact that'll have, but there'll be some. I know, when those types of things happen, so I tend to, I have an America's Cup watch. It's not here on me now, but I bought it because so that awareness kind of creates energy and excitement, and you tend to do things or purchase things. So I think there'll be some of that impact. But beyond that, in terms of the plans or our plans relative to that, you talked about ship size, and so we have. We think we're sized pretty well relative to Bermuda. We have ships that fit perfectly in there and allow us to serve Hamilton, which is not available to everybody because of some of those limitations. So we feel good about that. A little side note: I have a former boss, 2 bosses ago, who's building a pretty significant hotel in Bermuda, and so he's already called me and trying to kind of influence based on that. And so, to your point, new destinations and new energy and excitement coming to the island will create things for us to consider. And so we feel we're right-sized pretty good right now, but as things evolve, we can always do more if it makes sense for our company and our guests.
I thought I'd share a funny small world story. I was out with some senior executives from Oracle as they support our financial system, and they were complaining because when the America's Cup was in San Francisco, they had, Oracle obviously had sponsored a ship, and they were demonstrating how their amazing technology was going to dramatically improve racing. And they had created this fantastic VIP viewing platform for America's Cup. And then a Princess cruise ship parked right in front of it. And so they were laughing that the Princess guests had the best view in the shop. So so I would think about how all the things position and make sure and take care of the good sponsors, right?
Yeah.
Well, my understanding is that probably celebrity ships will have the best view, right? Because things were, very close to the racing grounds. Well, let's talk a bit now about another important area in the Americas, Canada, New England. And the region has been working very hard to try to stretch out the season from the peak fall foliage period when most of you go. Holland America Line has been sailing in the summer in Canada and New England for a while and doing quite well, I understand. But what would it take for the other operators, Celebrity and Princess? Jan, would you like to start on that topic?
Sure.
To stretch out?
I would say, we love Canada, New England, and one of the things that the Canadian ports do exceptionally well is partner together to promote the region. And they have very creative ideas about how do you make the guest experience in each port special and memorable. And so we, over the years, have increased the size of the ships that go there. We put Regal Princess, our latest ship into Canada, Royal and Regal, into Canada, New England. To date, it's still a seasonal product for us, but we think the Canada, New England area does a fantastic job. And the conversations that I have with them are around the greater awareness that they can build about the region as a destination, the more consumer interest, the more demand, the more appealing that is to us. And that's done in a variety of ways: promotion, social media, making sure that it's a fabulous guest experience, so then you get wonderful word of mouth. So we very much enjoy our cruises and over the years continue to take our new ships and route them through Canada, New England.
So Canada, New England has a very special place in my heart. From an emotional perspective, I grew up in New England. I was born in Massachusetts, lived most of my life there before I relocated to South Florida. And when I started in this company 30 years ago, New England and Eastern Canada, all of these amazing ports that we visit, were part of my territory. So I got to visit them, and they're beautiful and wonderful, and it's just a fabulous part of North America. The president and CEO part of me now says that, with the fleet the size of Celebrity and our need to deploy our assets where they are most profitable, we have only so far been able to look at Canada and New England on the shoulder seasons of Bermuda, because those are the times that it makes sense. The family market and people during the summer, which is the peak travel time and when they want to go, and our ability to attract the guests that we need at any given time of the year on any given ship, so far has dictated that the peak season is still from Bayonne to Bermuda, with Canada, New England on the two sides of that. Do I ever see that growing? Maybe to Jan's point, as the destination these destinations are able to present themselves in a way to consumers that they really say they want to go there during the peak summertime. That would certainly be one way. If our fleet grows, perhaps I had a conversation just last night at one of the cocktail parties from Nova Scotia, asking us when we could stretch our deployment, and I've had conversations with Boston, again, my hometown, about how we might try turnaround porting there, which is another option and another alternative. So we do look at different and more unique ways to do Canada, New England, and we will continue to do that as long as it makes sense for us, and our guests tell us that that's what they want. And as long as that area of the country and North America can really present itself in a compelling way, and we can continue to do things with them that would cause us to perhaps either lengthen our season or provide or offer more of those types of cruises.
Orlando, would you like to see some of these other companies coming in during the summer, or are you quite happy with the controlling the market?
Oh, I like throwing a party. That's okay. That's okay. I was born in Bangor, Maine, so similar to you, have an affinity for that part of the world. I have a home in Martha's Vineyard, so definitely have an affinity. And so figuring out how we can create a broader affinity for others is great. I'm supportive.
And Roberto, MSC did a couple of seasons in Canada and New England, I believe. As your fleet grows, might that be a